Hello, am I audible to you all?
Yes, madam, you are.
Hello,
Yes,
good
ma'am.
uh, but why please okay. Sorry for delay. Hello, good evening everyone. Today's webinar on scapulohumeral rhythm dysfunction, which will be going to be present by Dr. Himani Patel, who works as a clinical therapist at BITS Institute of Physiotherapy, who has also having work experience about 2 years in various clinical setups. Today she will be presenting the normal scapulohumeral rhythm and biomechanics, causes, and detailed management of the scapulohumeral dysfunction. So now in this today's webinar, we have two sessions. First session is the presentation of the webinar by the madam, and second session is a question answer session. So I request you all the participants kindly mute your audio and video for smooth conduction of the webinar. I will repeat. I request you all the participants kindly mute your audio and video for the smooth conduction of the webinar. So now without any delay, let's proceed to the begin the webinar. Over to you, Himani madam.
Thank you so much, Rutika ma'am, for such beautiful introduction. So before starting this session, firstly, I would like to thank my whole Beats Physio team and especially to the principal sir and vice principal sir for believing me and giving me this opportunity to present this webinar to you all. So today's topic is the scapulohumeral rhythm dysfunction. We'll cover the basics and we'll move towards the management. So, before starting the topic, I would like to discuss a few things that why I have chosen this topic. Because in the clinical setup, we have seen many cases are coming for shoulder that it depends on that whether the patient is having frozen shoulder or the patient can be having rotator cuff injury. But the similarity in all the shoulder cases is the chief complaint is the patient is having reduced range of motion, and whenever there is the reduced range of motion of shoulder joint, we think of the scapulohumeral rhythm. So the scapulohumeral rhythm is itself very much important that it gets compromised in every situation whenever there is compromise with the range of motion, and also whenever there is a disturbance in the scapulohumeral rhythm, whenever the smooth functioning of the rhythm gets disturbed, there are another conditioning which underlying conditioning which comes up and creates many problems. So starting with today's webinar, so what is scapulohumeral rhythm is? It is the smooth interplay between the scapula and the humerus. It is also known as the glenohumeral rhythm, as the main articulating site is the glenoid and the humerus. So it is known as the glenohumeral rhythm. So there is a definitive pattern of interaction. There is one fixed pattern in which the scapula and the humerus moves in the coordination with each other to provide us the full range that is of 180 degree of flexion and abduction. So if we discuss about the normal scapulohumeral rhythm, it is divided into the two phases. The first being the setting phase. In the setting phase, initially, the 30 degrees of motion is primarily occurring at the glenohumeral joint. The scapulothoracic joint at in the initial 30 degree will have a normal position. It will not move to a greater extent, but in the only initial 30 degrees will be movement will be done by the glenohumeral joint itself. After the 30 degrees, there will be 2:1 ratio between the glenohumeral and the scapulothoracic joint. The 2 degrees the glenohumeral moves, to compensate it, the 1 degree the scapulothoracic joint will move. So for the 180 degree complete movement, the 60 degree will be contributed by the scapulothoracic joint and the 120 degree will be contributed by the glenohumeral joint. As the scapula and the scapulothoracic joint and the glenohumeral joint are in a close chain position. So isolated function, isolated movement is rather practically impossible. So whenever the scapulothoracic joint is moving, it is anatomically linked with the sternoclavicular and the acromioclavicular joint. So whenever the scapulothoracic joint move, there is some degree of movement at the SC joint and AC joint as well. Now, moving towards the importance of scapulohumeral rhythm. Now, why we are dealing with the scapulohumeral rhythm? Why the scapulohumeral rhythm is there? Why there is not isolated movement? So, there are two main reasons why the scapula should move along with the uh, humerus. So the first reason is, as we know, there are, whenever the arm goes into the elevation, there are arthrokinematic movement occurring, that is the minor movement of rolling, gliding and spinning, which occurs at the joint level, that are the arthrokinematic movement are happening. Whenever the patient abducts the arm, the humerus will roll and spin and will glide. So to provide room for the humerus, the scapula will also move along with the humerus, so that there will be enough space for the humerus to perform the arthrokinematic motions. So because of that arthrokinematic motion, the head is occupied inside the glenoid labrum, and there will not be any subluxation or the dislocation. And this was the first main reason why the scapulohumeral rhythm is present in the body. The another reason is there are multiple muscles which joins the scapula to the thoracic region and the upper limb to the scapula. There are multiple muscles present over there which crosses these joint. So to maintain the normal length tension relationship over this part, it is necessary for the scapula to move, so that the normal lever is maintained, the mechanical advantage can be obtained from this. So this was the two main type importance of the scapulohumeral rhythm. Now, this is the main scapula stabilizers. There are another muscles which works in the kinetics of the shoulder, scapulohumeral rhythm, but these are the main stabilizers which works as the static forces which keeps the scapula attached to the thoracic cavity. And because of this muscle, the scapula is resting on the thoracic cage. The first is trapezius, then the serratus anterior, rhomboids, levator scapulae, and the latissimus dorsi. These five are the main stabilizers. These are the static as well as the dynamic stabilizers. So when the arm is at rest, also this muscle will work, and also when the arm is moving in the 180 degree of motion, this sorry, these muscles will contribute in the dynamic stabilization of the shoulder blade on the thoracic cage. Now, before understanding what the abnormality occurs, we need to know what the normal is. Kinematics of the scapulohumeral rhythm, so that we can understand then why there is scapulohumeral rhythm dysfunction, why the which type of muscular imbalance are causing the scapulohumeral rhythm dysfunction. And so first focusing on the kinematics, at which movement will if we lift the arm in any plane, whether it is in the flexion or scaption or the abduction, there are primarily three-dimensional movement of the scapula which contributes in this elevation of the arm. The first and the foremost being the upward rotation of the scapula. Whenever the arm is lifting upward, the scapula will be moving in this direction. Right, so the first and the foremost will be the scapular upward rotation. Then the second thing will be the posterior tilting of the scapula on the shoulder blade in the normal anatomical position. In the resting position of the scapula is slightly anteriorly tilted. But while we elevate the upper limb, there will be slight posterior tilting of the scapula. Along with it, there will be varying levels of the internal and external rotation. Now, the internal and external rotation will depend whether we are lifting the arm in flexion, scaption, or the abduction. So basically, there are three types of movements, that is upward rotation, posterior tilting, and internal and external rotation. Now we'll move towards the kinetics. The kinetics will look towards the responsible factors which will produce the force and which will produce the movement of the scapulas. So the main factors are the serratus anterior, serratus posterior, the trapezius, all the three fibers of the trapezius, the rhomboids, which will act as scapular retractors. Then there will be teres major, the levatus scapulae, pectoralis major and minor, the latissimus dorsi, and the flexibility and the mobility of the thoracolumbar fascia. So these are the factors which together will work and will produce the different forces which will produce the upward and downward rotation of the scapula on the thoracic wall. Now we'll see that how this muscle will, in accordance to with each other, how they will work along with each other. So first we'll discuss that what happens if we elevate our arm, and then we'll discuss what happens when we adduct our arm. While abducting, the main movement will be the upward rotation. So for the upward rotation, the trapezius and the serratus anterior are the prime movers. They are the prime upward rotators and the protractors. They are the agonist for the upward rotation movement. The serratus anterior and the trapezius also prevents the downward rotatory force of the deltoid. Whenever the scapula moves upward direction, the humerus will move in the upward direction. There will be downward rotatory force of the deltoid acting in this direction. So to nullify this effect, the serratus anterior and the trapezius will for push these scapula in the upward rotation. Now, this was about the prime movers. Now, while this upward movement is occurring, the latissimus dorsi and the pectoralis major will act as the dynamic stabilizers. Now, whenever the serratus anterior and the trapezius are doing their work, they are the prime movers. At that point of time, the latissimus dorsi and the pectoralis major will work as the dynamic stabilizers. They will maintain the normal positioning of the scapula while the scapula is moving. Right? So, now how this works, the latissimus dorsi will produce the compressive force on the glenohumeral joint, and the pectoralis major will produce the adduction force on the glenohumeral joint. So because of these two forces, the scapula will stay on its position. Right? As in the image you can see, these are the three fibers of the trapezius which will work in the different line of action, and the serratus anterior will work in this line of action. Whenever the scapula and the arm are going in upward direction, the deltoid will have downward rotatory force. So the forces of the trapezius and the serratus anterior will nullify this force of the deltoid. I guess I am making myself clear. Now, this was about when we rotate the scapula in the upward direction. Now, when we rotate the scapula in the downward direction, at that point of time, the latissimus dorsi and the pectoralis major are the prime movers. They will adduct and internally rotate the shoulder, same while they are the prime muscle for the downward rotation of the scapula. So the latissimus dorsi and the pectoralis major are the prime movers, and the pectoralis minor is the synergistic muscle for the scapula to downward rotation. Now, if we talk about the teres major, the teres major has also the same effect as of the latissimus dorsi, that is of adduction, extension, and the internal rotation. It will also help in the scapular downward rotation and the retraction. But the action of the teres major is usually depend on the action of the rhomboids muscle. Now the rhomboids is the main retractor of the scapula. It will maintain the position of the scapula. So for the downward rotation movement, the rhomboid will act as the dynamic stabilizer. And also the rhomboid muscle acts eccentrically to control the change in the position of the scapula during arm elevation. That is, it also acts eccentrically. It also acts as the dynamic stabilizer. So this is by here we have covered the kinetics and kinematics of the shoulder joint and the scapulohumeral rhythm. So as in the image we can see, whenever the scapula is rotating in the upward direction, the prime movers are the trapezius and the serratus anterior. And whenever we are coming back to the normal position, the downward rotators are the rhomboids and the pectoralis major and minor. Now, the scapulohumeral rhythm, if we look into the area of the sports, there are many sports in which the athletes are prone for the overhead activities. The athlete shoulder is prone for the high acceleration, high intensity jerk and jerky movements. The activities such as javelin throw in baseball, in tennis, in football, swimming, in all these activities, the athlete shoulder is prone to more injuries because there will be high velocity jerk always comes in the shoulder level. In the overhead movement, there is one position known as cocking position in which the athlete will have complete external rotation. The image also shows the cocking position. Over here the shoulder is completely into the external rotation, so the shoulder is exposed to this kind of forces whenever the arm is in the cocking position, right? So for to understand any biomechanical changes in the athletic person, we need to understand the scapulohumeral rhythm. That whenever the subject is continuously prone for such type of jerky movement, the normal resting position of the scapula will be changed. So the proper function of the glenohumeral joint requires a balance activity of the scapular stabilizing muscles to allow the scapula to move on the posterolateral surface of the thoracic cage, so that the scapula is more prone to damage. The scapula stabilizing muscle must act in a strong way to maintain the static as well as the dynamic position of the scapula. So the disturbed scapulohumeral rhythm can cause negative mechanical effect on rotator cuff with potential tendon injury. Now, if there will be altered scapulohumeral rhythm, the main risk in the athlete are there are high chances or that the rotator cuff can get damaged because the length tension relationship will not be maintained, because the scapula will not move in accordance to the humerus. So if we want to evaluate the patient, if we want to check what is the causative factor in the athlete, we must focus on the scapulohumeral rhythm, because the disturbed scapulohumeral rhythm can be the major cause of the damage occurring in the athlete. So the overhead athlete have some asymmetry in scapular upward rotation and scapulohumeral rhythm ratio between the dominant and the non-dominant side. Because the dominant side is used so repetitively in the so high velocity jerk, there are some asymmetry between the dominant and non-dominant side. So it should not be considered automatically that it is pathological, but because of so many changes, the scapula has adapted the new position. So the therapist must work in accordance that whether this adaptation is normal or the abnormal. Now we'll look forward that what are the causes of the scapulohumeral rhythm dysfunction, why the dysfunction is occurring. The first factor is the fracture of clavicle. As we know, the scapula is in the closed chain. The AC joint, SC joint, all are moving in accordance. If the clavicle gets fractured, the AC and SC contribution will get affected. Because of the affection at the AC joint and SC joint, there will be affection in the scapulohumeral rhythm. So any fracture related to this clavicle or the scapula will result into the disturbed scapulohumeral rhythm. Then if we see the joint pathologies, any pathologies that including the AC joint or the glenohumeral joint, that is frozen shoulder, or the acromioclavicular arthritis, or the spinal accessory nerve palsy. Because of the spinal accessory nerve palsy, the trapezius muscle will get paralyzed. So because the trapezius is getting paralyzed, the upward rotation will be affected, right? Because it is the prime upward rotator. So this is the pathology because of which there will be scapulohumeral rhythm dysfunction. Then the stiffness, the few muscle will become tight and the few muscle will have weakness. So because of the imbalances of this muscle, the main reason being the muscular imbalance for the scapulohumeral rhythm dysfunction. The dysfunction, in majority of cases of dysfunction, the muscular stability, the muscular imbalance is always there. So the stiffness will be in the pectoralis minor, the bicep short head, then the posterior capsule inflexibility, and the ligamentous stiffness. This structure will get tight, and because of this tight structure, the scapula will not able to move on the thoracic cage. Then the muscular causes, if the serratus anterior muscle gets weakened, the main sign, the scapular winging will be present if the serratus anterior gets weak. Then there will be abnormal trapezius force couple. If the trapezius is weak, it will not be able to properly upwardly rotate the scapula. Then the sorry, then there will be decreased rotator cuff strength. So the rotator cuff will have a reduced strength. This can occur even after the rotator cuff injury, or even after some type of surgery. The rotator cuff strength will be reduced. So because of which there will be disturbance in the normal rhythmic movement. So these were the few causes. Now we'll see one of the most important syndrome, that is the six scapula syndrome. This syndrome is most commonly seen in the athletes, in the overhead athletes whose shoulder are more prone to injury. This syndrome occurs because of the fatigue. The musculature around the shoulder in the overhead athlete will get weak, and because of that, this syndrome will occur. That is known as the six scapula syndrome. The SICK acronym will stand for S is for scapular malpositioning. In the athlete, the scapula will be normally downwardly positioned. In normally, if we see the surface marking, at the T2 spinous level, there will be spine of the scapula, and the inferior angle of the scapula will be at the T7 level. It is the normal anatomical position. But in the athlete, because of the weakness and the fatigue, the scapula is little downwardly placed. Right? So that is the scapular malpositioning. Then the inferior medial border prominence will be there. Then the coracoid pain and malposition, because the pectorals and the biceps are getting tight, there will be coracoid pain because they origin from over there. So because of its attachment, there will be coracoid pain, and the coracoid malpositioning will be there because of the tightening of the muscles. Then there will be dyskinesis of the scapular movement. The K stands for the dyskinesis of the scapular movement. The dyskinesis is there will be loss of normal rhythm. The movement will be hampered. Either the rhythm will be disturbed, or either the movement will be reduced. So the six stands for scapular malpositioning, inferior medial border prominence, coracoid pain and malposition, that is because of the tightened musculature, and the dyskinesis of the scapular movement. This is mainly an overuse syndrome. The muscular muscles surrounding the scapula and the humerus are getting weak. So because of that, there is six scapula syndrome. This is usually seen in athletes. This is very rare condition in normal person who are not prone to more vigorous type of exercises. This is mostly seen in the athletes who are more prone to vigorous type of exercises. Now, we'll focus more on the scapular disc kinesis as we are dealing with the scapulohumeral rhythm. So it is the abnormal movement of the shoulder blade, that is the known as disc kinesis. This occurs in a variety of shoulder problem. It is an important sign of an underlying shoulder disorder and a guide to shoulder rehabilitation. The shoulder disc kinesis itself is not a diagnosis. It is the sign of some underlying pathology. So it will guide us towards the proper diagnosis and the proper management of the underlying pathology. Now, moving towards the further scapular dysfunction, the Kibler has divided the scapular dysfunction or the scapular dyskinesis into three different types. According to the level of prominence, according to which part of the scapular blade is getting prominent whenever we move our arm in elevation. So, depending on the level of prominence, there are three types. The first one being the inferior medial scapular border prominence. As in the diagram, we can see this inferior medial border is getting prominent whenever we are elevating our arm. This becomes more evident in the cocking position. Whenever there is the cocking position, that is the 90 degree of abduction and maximum of external rotation of the shoulder in athletes. In this cocking position, the inferior medial scapular border gets prominent because there will be tightness of the pectoralis major and the minor muscle, and the weakness of the lower trapezius and the serratus anterior muscle. This type of dysfunction occurs because the anterior structures are getting tightened, that are the pectoralis major and minor, and the posterior structure gets weakened, that are the lower trapezius and the serratus anterior muscle. And the posterior tipping of the scapula is responsible for functional narrowing of the subacromial space, and because of this there will be subacromial bursitis, or the impingement can be the result whenever the athlete will lift the head. So this is often noticed in the early stages of the shoulder disorder. This is one of the early signs so that we can diagnose what the underlying pathology is. Now moving towards the type 2, this occurs because mainly the scapula stabilizers muscle are weakened or because they are fatigued. Over here, the medial border, whole of the medial border will get prominent whenever the athlete goes into the cocking position or whenever the normal individual lifts up the hand. The whole of the medial scapular border will get prominent because the trapezius and the rhomboids, and along with them the serratus anterior, is getting weak, or if because of the overuse the muscles are getting fatigued, it can also be the reason. So the third and the last type of classification is the superior medial border prominence. Now, this type of dyskinesis occurs whenever there will be rotator cuff injury. So, according to the type of dyskinesis, we can go in the detail that what kind of injury the athlete or a person is having, which muscle is getting affected, whether the rotator cuff is getting injured or not. So depending upon the scapular dyskinesis, we can find out the exact injury or exact cause of the injury. Now we'll move towards the signs and symptoms. The signs and symptoms of the scapular dyskinesis, the first thing will be pain or tenderness around the scapula whenever the patient use the hands overhead or whenever the patient lifts something heavy. There will be pain and the tenderness in the scapular region. Then there will be snapping or popping sensation around the scapula with shoulder movement, because the scapula is not able to move in a smooth rhythmic movement. Because of that, there will be snapping or popping sensation because the normal rhythm is lost. And there will be loss of strength with shoulder and arm use as the muscle are fatigued, the muscle are weak. So because of that, the patient will feel there is lack of strength or loss of strength in the in the involved extremity. Then usually the asymmetrical posture, as we have seen the scapula, if there is six scapula syndrome or if there is malpositioning of the scapula will usually sit in the lower position. So there will be postural asymmetry. Then there will be winging of scapula because the serratus anterior and the trapezius and rhomboids are getting weak. And there will be the instability of the shoulder because the stabilizers are weak. So because of it, it will feel like the shoulder is giving away or it is moving out of the place. So these were the signs and symptoms if the patient is having scapular dyskinesis. Now, how will diagnose the scapular dyskinesis? This is the one most commonly used method in the clinical setups. That is the lateral scapular slide test. Over here, there are three different positions. First, the arm should be at rest. Then ask the patient to put the arm over the hip joint or the iliac crest. In the third position, the arm will be up 90 degrees abducted and the internally rotated. What the therapist will do, we have to take the nearest thoracic vertebrae, that is the T7 vertebrae nearest to the inferior angle of the scapula. We have to first palpate the inferior angle of the scapula and we have to go in the horizontal direction to palpate the nearest vertebrae. In the normal anatomical position, it will be the T7 vertebrae. We have to mark the distance on both the sides. That in the normal resting position, we have to mark the distance between the inferior angle of the scapula on the right and the T7 vertebrae, and similarly on the left. Then ask the patient to put the hands on the iliac crest and will again repeat the same maneuver, that will measure the distance between the inferior angle on both the side, right and left, and will use the reference point T7. And lastly, we'll again repeat the whole maneuver when the patient is in the third position, that is the arm is abducted to 90 degrees and will be internally rotated. Now we have to compare the both the readings on the both the sides. From the right side should be compared with the left side. If the difference is of 1.5 centimeter or more, then we can conclude that there is scapular dysfunction or scapulohumeral rhythm dyskinesis. Right? If the right side or we have to compare right with the left only, and if there is difference of 1.5 or more, then we can comment that there is something wrong with the scapulohumeral rhythm and the normal scapulohumeral rhythm is disturbed. So this is about the lateral scapular slide test. The another test which is used for the diagnosis is the scapular dyskinesis test. This is the visual test. We have to observe the patient from the back. We have to ask the patient to lift any heavy object. We can ask the patient to lift dumbbell. Then ask the patient to bring the upper limb either into the flexion, scaption, or the abduction movement. We have to observe for the scapular dyskinesis. For commenting whether there is scapular dyskinesis is not, if there is an prominence of any border, as we have seen in three different types, whether any of the scapular border is getting prominent, whether there is winging of scapula, or whether there is dysrhythmia, that is if there is lack of normal movement, or there is excessive movement, or the movement is not rhythmic, or the movement is not smooth. So from all of this together, we can comment whether the normal scapulohumeral rhythm is preserved or is in the dysfunction. So the scapular dyskinesis test is the visual observation. Will ask the patient to lift the heavy object in any of the arm elevation, whether in flexion, scaption, or abduction. And we have to observe whether there is any winging of any border or whether there is dysrhythmia. Right? So from this two, we can clinically comment whether there is dyskinesia or not. Then there is one more test which we can ask the patient to perform. We can ask the patient to perform wall push-ups for 15 to 20 times. Now, if there will be serratus anterior weakness, there will be visible winging of scapula. So from which we can comment that there is disturbance of normal rhythm. If the patient is young and is able to do wall push-up, we can ask the patient to do the floor push-ups, so that it will put more pressure on the scapular stabilizing muscle. And if there is weakness, then we can get to know from the winging of the scapula or winging of the any of the border of the scapula. Now, moving towards the imaging, we can, from the X-ray, we can diagnose whether the normal alignment of the scapula is maintained or whether there is some malalignment. We can go for MRI also, so that any muscular or ligamentous injury can be known. And the goniometry, cinematography, and three-dimensional tracking system can also be used to evaluate any scapular dyskinesis or scapulohumeral rhythm dysfunction. So this was how we can diagnose the scapulohumeral dysfunction. Now moving towards the main part, that how we will rehabilitate the patient, how we will manage the scapulohumeral rhythm dysfunction. There are three main principles: that to stretch the tightened structures, to mobilize the scapula, and to strengthen the weakened structure. All of this work hand in hand. Any exercise protocol or any exercise regimen will have all of these three together. Some exercise from few stretching exercises, few mobilizing exercises, then few strengthening exercises. All will combine together and will form the one protocol for a patient. And so starting with the stretching exercises first, as we have seen, the pectorals are getting tightened. So we'll go for the pectoralis minor and major stretching. The most commonly the pectoralis minor will get tightened in the scapulohumeral rhythm dysfunction. So for this is the self stretching of the pectoralis minor. Ask the patient to hold any border of the door. So you have to just hold the border, and the arm should be elevated more than 90 degree, and then ask the patient to move in the forward direction. As soon as the patient moves in the forward direction, there will be stretch field over this area, that is the pectoralis minor area. So this is how the patient will stretch pectoralis minor. Then another thing will be the upper trapezius stretch. Many a time, because of the imbalance in the muscle, the upper trapezius will go into the spasm. So to relieve that, this is the upper trapezius stretch, that the neck should be flexed in the opposite direction and be rotated in the same direction. So this is the stretch for the upper trapezius. Then this is the sleeper stretch. In the sleeper stretch, the patient by himself will pull the arm into the internal rotation. This stretch will help improving the range of internal rotation, and the external rotators will get stretched. From this position, the patient will bring arm down and will try to touch the floor or the mat. So this is the sleeper stretch. Then there will be genie stretch. In the genie stretch, the patient will bring the arm horizontally across the body. This will stretch the posterior capsule and the posterior structures of the shoulder. Then the levator scapulae stretch. The levator scapulae stretch is similar to that of trapezius, only the rotation of the neck will be opposite in the direction. In the trapezius, the neck will be rotated in the same direction. In the levator scapulae, the neck will be rotated in the opposite direction. Then we'll come towards the latissimus dorsi stretch. In the figure, you can see how the patient can do the self stretch of latissimus dorsi. So this was about the stretching exercises. Now we'll move towards the mobilization exercises. This is the scapular clock exercises is one of the most important and very useful exercise whenever we are focusing to mobilize the scapula. We can ask the patient to hold the medicine ball over the over the wall and will ask the patient to internally and externally rotate the arm. In this way, the scapula will move. In the similar way, we can bring our hand forward and backward also. So this is how the scapula will move in a rhythmic manner. Similarly, if the patient finds maintaining this position to 90-degree difficult, we can ask the patient to place the medicine ball on the mat and then move the ball in the forward and backward direction, as we can see in the image. It will go that the scapula will move in the protraction and the retraction. There will be smooth and the smooth rhythmic movement of the scapula, which will help us to mobilize and to restore the humeral rhythm back to normal. When the scapular pinches, ask the patient to bring the shoulder blades nearer to each other. The rhomboids will get strengthened and the scapular protraction and retraction will occur in the scapular pinches. In the robbery exercises, ask the patient to relax the hands first and bring them into 90 degree of abduction and the external rotation. As we can see in the image, the person is standing while the arms are at relaxed and then bringing back towards the 90 degree of abduction and the external rotation. This movement will also enhance the scapulohumeral rhythm and will help to maintain the normal mobility of the scapula on the thoracic wall. And this is the one cross body stretch. It is similar to the genie stretch. We will bring the arm nearer to the body so that the complete protraction and retraction will occur of the scapula. And then we can go for the manual mobilization also. We have to grasp the inferior angle of the scapula with one hand, and from the another hand will grasp the fossa of the so suprascapular fossa will grab from the one hand, and from the another hand we will grab the inferior angle, and in this manner we can go for upward and downward movement. We can go for tilting as well, and we can go for protraction and retraction as well. So this is how we can manually mobilize the scapula with the help of both the hands, right? And while giving mobilization, the arm of the patient should always be supported on the therapist arm so that there will not be any tension in the surrounding muscles and the desired movement will be occurring. Now we'll move towards the strengthening exercises. There are there are so many strengthening exercises. There are many variation in the strengthening exercises as well. It completely depends on the capacity of the patient, that how much the patient is able to do, how much the patient body permits to do, according to which we can create the protocol for each of the individual patients. So the first are the IYTWs, also known as the limb loading exercises. These exercises can be done in the prone, in sitting, as well as in the standing position also. In the initial, it is advisable that we start this exercise in the standing position and then we'll move towards the prone position. In the first image, ask the patient to elevate both the arms, keeping the elbow straight, that is the I. In the Y, the patient will lift the arms in the scaption plane, so that is Y. And in the last, the patient will elevate the arm in the abduction position, that is the T. And in W position, both the shoulder will be capped in abduction, and the elbow will be flexed, and will ask the patient to lift both the hand in the upward direction. So this will work on the strengthening of the scapular stabilizers. If the patient is able to perform in the prone position, we can go for adding more resistance in the form of dumbbells. We can increase the resistance in the form of more heavier dumbbells. So from in this manner, we can go for strengthening. In the same exercise, we can go on adding on resistance, and we can increase the level of difficulty. Then this is the low row. In the first image is of the static rowing, that is the patient is standing straight and will try to push the hand back, that is the static rowing. In the second image, the patient will sit and you can use TheraBand as well. If the TheraBand is fixed to rod, or if the therapist is holding TheraBand from one hand, ask the patient to lift both the hands towards themselves, towards their waist. The hand should be at the waist level, and ask the patient to stretch TheraBand towards their waist. So this is the low row. If the patient is not comfortable with this kind of rowing, we can go for prone row, in which in the image we can see the patient is in prone line, and will ask the patient to bring the hand in the upward direction, so that we can go for unilateral and bilateral as well. Then there will be serratus punches. Because the serratus muscle is getting weak, it is important to strengthen the serratus. We can go for serratus punches. If we don't want to use the TheraBand, we can go with the dumbbells also. We can use the dumbbell and ask the patient to punch in the forward direction. So these are the serratus punches. Or if the therapist is holding back, ask the patient to go for bilateral punches. Or if the patient is not comfortable with bilateral, we can ask for the unilateral as well. If the patient is not able to do the serratus punches in the standing position or sitting position, we can modify it into the supine position. Then it will known as the supine serratus activator, in which the scapula will be stabilized on the surface and will ask the patient to push towards the ceiling, to punch towards the ceiling, in which the serratus will itself work. Then there will be dynamic hug. The dynamic hug is, as we can see in the image, both the shoulders will be bring forward and cross in front of your body. What will happen? The scapula protractors and retractors will get strengthened, because they both will work concentrically and eccentrically. So while doing dynamic hug, from backside the patient will pass the TheraBand and ask to cross the hand in front of the body. So that is the dynamic hug. And this is the overhead wall rollout. We can use foam roller or the physio ball or medicine ball as well for the overhead wall rollout. Just grasp the ball and go for smooth upward and downward movement. This smooth upward and downward movement will help the patient to develop the eccentric as well as the concentric control of the musculature around the scapula, that are the scapula stabilizers, right? So there will be eccentric and concentric functioning of the scapula stabilizers. Then there will be horizontal band fly. Ask the patient to pull apart the band, so that is known as the horizontal band fly. This will help to strengthen the rhomboids, as there will be scapular adduction. Then there will be medicine ball toss and catch. The medicine ball toss and catch is a type of plyometric exercises. We don't usually do this in the normal patients. If the patient is athletic, then we can use this nice medicine ball toss and catch, so that the the shoulder will get adapt to the jerky movements which which the athlete is going to have in the sports career, right? So medicine ball tossing and catching is a kind of plyometric exercise. Then the band pull apart is the same we have seen in the horizontal band fly, and just ask the patient to stretch the band as much as the patient can. Then the darts, if the patient, the darts are also a type of plyometric exercise. We don't recommend this type of exercise in the normal individual. Only when the outcome required is very much high, if the athlete has to return back to the sports, then only the darts, push-ups we can use. Right? In the darts, ask the patient to lift the head and the arms as well, so that the scapular muscles will get strengthened and they will work eccentrically to maintain the position against the gravity. And then we can strengthen the internal and external rotators. It is advisable to keep a towel or a pillow to ensure the normal movement and to avoid any unnecessary movements or any trick movements. So we can go for internal and external rotation as well. Then these are the face pulls. We have seen the low rows in the similar way. These are the face pulls which we have to bring towards our face. So in this same exercise, the therapist can hold the TheraBand, and if the height difference matter, then we can ask the patient to sit in a kneeling position, and we can hold the TheraBand like this, so that the patient will easily will be able to pull towards his or her face. Then this will be the lawn mower exercise, in which as if we are trying to start a lawn mower, we have to pull in the similar way. This is a kind of PNF exercise for the shoulder, so that it is a PNF action in which the lawn mower will work. For the lawn mower, we can also use the TheraBand for this exercise. Then the SWAT, this is nothing but the PNF pattern, in which we are training the upper limb to work in a coordinated manner. And then the overhead dumbbell press. This overhead dumbbell press will train the patient whenever the overhead activity will be there, or if after the treatment rehabilitation ends, this exercise will train the patient to lift anything on the shoulder, or to take anything from the overhead position. Then there will be dumbbell punches. The difference between the serratus punch and the dumbbell punches, serratus punch will be going in the front direction. The dumbbell punches are a kind of rotatory punches. In this manner, we can use, so that the scapula will move in the forward and backward movement. So this is how the dumbbell punches are. Your whole body will get turn, right? From left hand you have to punch towards the right side, and from right hand you have to punch towards the left side. And there will be bear crawl on this Swiss ball. This bear crawl on the Swiss ball is a kind of plyometric exercise. This exercise we only use for the athletes, right? This over here there will be this is the weight bearing position. Your shoulder will be in the weight bearing position and will be taking whole of your body weight, and you have to walk forward as well as backward as well as side to sides, right? So this is a type of closed chain exercises. Up till here we have seen the open chain exercises. Then comes the push-up. Push-ups, there are variety of push-ups. All the push-ups are the closed chain exercises. Normally when we start strengthening program, we initially focus on the open chain exercise, and then we'll move towards the closed chain exercises, right? So initially we'll start with the wall push-up. To increase the difficulty, we can go for table push-up. Further, we can go for modified prone push-up. To increase further more difficulty, we can go for prone push-up. In prone push-up also we can go for hovering push-up. That is, whenever the patient will go in the towards the floor, then we can ask the patient to shift weight on right and left both the sides. Okay. Then there will be press-ups. In this press-ups, the latissimus dorsi will strengthen the most. Both the hand of the patient will take whole body weight, and will ask the patient to lift the body up and the down. So this is the press-up. And then there will be Superman crawl. All of these exercises are the form of plyometric exercises. The Superman crawl will also bring the whole body weight on the one upper extremity itself. So this was all about the strengthening exercises. We have seen up till here, we have covered everything. So it is up to the therapist, from therapist to therapist, it will differ that what the therapist chooses to give the to form the protocol. But it is advisable to keep all three of the different form of exercise, that are the stretching exercise, mobilizing exercise, and strengthening exercise, to form a protocol for the patient having any shoulder pathology, so that the scapulohumeral rhythm disturbance can be avoided and can be treated effectively. So by here I end my today's session. Thank you so much for attending the session and listening to me peacefully.
Thank you very much, ma'am. It was a nice webinar. Now we are heading to the second session, which is a question answer session. So I would request you all the participants kindly ask your questions, queries and doubts by typing in the middle comment box. You have a 10 to 20 seconds. I repeat, I would request you all the participants kindly ask your questions by typing in the middle comment box. You will be given 20 to 30 seconds. Hello, madam.
Yes,
There
ma'am.
is one question. How will we do the LSST test?
Yeah, that is a lateral scapular slide test. As I have already explained, we have to take a reference point, that is the T7 vertebrae, and we have to check the distance between the T7 vertebrae and the inferior angle of the scapula on both the right and left side. First, we'll check the distance while the patient is having arm at the rest. Then we'll repeat the measurement when the patient will put the hands on the iliac crest, and again we'll repeat the test when the will ask the patient to 90-degree abduct the arm and internally rotate the arm. From this we can know that how much the scapula is moving, so that whether there is any difference on the right and left side, and whether there is smooth movement or not. So from this we can know whether the scapula is moving on both the side in the same way, or whether there is any scapular dysfunction.
Dr. Mustaqim Daud, hope you have gotten your answers. Now, anyone has asked any question, please type in the comment box. Okay, there is a one more question from Dr. Forum Jani. Is cat camel exercise useful for latissimus dorsi strengthening?
Yes, we can use cat and camel for latissimus dorsi strengthening. Moreover, the cat and camel exercise will mobilize your thoracic and lumbar spine. It is a kind of mobility exercise. So for strengthening purpose, it will help, but it is not specific for strengthening of latissimus dorsi. It is basically used for mobilization of the thoracic and lumbar spine. So it will work, but not to a greater extent.
Okay, there is one more question from Dr. Kemi Madam. How can we progress in exercise week wise, especially for strengthening exercise?
Okay. Initially, we will evaluate the strength of the patient. That is the patient able to do resisted exercise or not. So we'll start without any resistance initially for a week. Then after a week, we can start adding the resistance exercises. That is in the form of dumbbells or the therabands. And we'll add on increase, we'll go on increasing the resistance week wise, and initially for the 1 or 2 week we can go for open chain exercises for the 2 weeks initially, and from the third week onwards we can go for closed chain exercises. So it will also increase the level of difficulty. So to going from 1 week to another, we can go for adding resistance in the form of theraband or the dumbbells, or we can go from open chain to the closed chain exercises.
There is one more question from Dr. Krupa Patel. In which condition it is necessary to check scapulohumeral rhythm?
In any of the shoulder condition, whenever the shoulder's range of motion is compromised, or whenever there is any pathology surrounding the shoulder, we can go for this checking the scapulohumeral rhythm. But mainly whenever the patient complains of reduction in the range of motion, at that point of time it is necessary to evaluate the scapulohumeral rhythm. Or whenever there are the signs of impingement also, we can go for the evaluation of the scapulohumeral rhythm, because if there is disturbance in the normal rhythm, there are higher chances that the subacromial bursa will will have bursitis, or the structures inside the subacromial bursa will get impinged. So if there are the signs and symptoms of impingement, or if the patient complains of reduced mobility of the shoulder, it is advisable to check the scapulohumeral rhythm.
Last time I'm asking, if anyone has any question, please type in the comment box. Okay, so I can see there is no other question. So Dr. Himani ma'am, over to you if you would like to say something before I start my vote of thanks.
Thank you, madam. It was very great experience to discuss such important topic with all the physios present here. I would look forward to take more such session if I would be able to. Thank you so much for attending this session peacefully and for asking such innovative questions. Thank you so much.
Oh, okay. Now we are going to conclude this webinar. So before I conclude this webinar, I would like to show my special gratitude towards the founder, president and chairman Jagdish Bhai Patel sir, our campus director Dhruv Bhai Patel sir, and joint managing trustee Srimati Patel madam, and campus director Mrs. Hardi Patel madam. I also extend my gratitude towards the Dr. Mehul Jadhav sir, who is the principal of the BITS Institute of Physiotherapy, and Dr. Safraz Nawaz Shah sir, vice principal of the BITS Institute of Physiotherapy, and also my whole physiotherapy colleague staff. I would like to give the special thanks to the whole computer department and Gada Dada for graphic designing in the webinar. And last but not the least, I would like to thank each of you participants who are present here and given the valuable time. Thank you so much and have a nice day.